Hello and welcome to the Game 3 podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today we're going to talk about Game 4 of the NBA Finals, which was a walkover in favor of the Dallas Mavericks. Then we're going to take your 2024 NBA draft questions, and I couldn't be more excited. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Oh! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game 3 podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? Wasn't expecting that result for Game 4 of the NBA Finals. I didn't have what did we get at the end of that game? We had JD Davis, Springer, Jordan Walsh, Svi. My guy Svi got 10 minutes in this game.
And Svi was out there chucking, baby. He was getting some shots.
Hey, you know what? I brought up Tim Hardaway Jr., needed to play and get some buckets. He got some buckets here in Game 4. Yeah.
We got 14 Peyton Pritchard jumpers. That was fun. We got, Tim Hardaway Jr. going 5 for 7 from 3, like basically all in the fourth quarter. It was a game, man. The Dallas Mavericks win 122-84. This got out to, I think, 45 or 48 at some point, and then Boston, like at the end, kind of brought it back a little bit, I guess. This is a blowout. And the reason it was a blowout, and we're sitting here, we're 3-0 coming into this game. And I think what we can talk about above all to start is just the engagement defensively from the Dallas Mavericks, particularly Luka Doncic. But more than that, they finally did stuff that you and I have been talking about throughout the entirety of this series. They finally pushed tempo, and more than anything, they made a concerted effort to try and get to the rim. I have here in the first quarter, they had the 3 early drives in the first 3.5 minutes from Luka and Kyrie to finish. Then they had the additional 2 attempted drives by Kyrie and Derrick Jones to try and finish at the rim. They had another Kyrie drive and finish at the rim within the first 5 minutes. So that's like 7 attempts in the first 5 minutes of the game at the basket, where they were aggressively trying to attack and take advantage of the fact that Kristaps Porzingis was in all likelihood not going to play in this game, even though Joe Mazzulla said ahead of the game that he was available basically in case of emergency, right? The emergencies came and he still didn't play. So that makes me think that he was just never coming onto the court. I think that I loved this Dallas approach, and it isn't dissimilar from the approach that they took in the first quarter of Game 3. I thought they were aggressive getting downhill in the first quarter of that game, and it led to that early lead. The thing about this game was they continued that approach, and they continued to fire all of their bullets, so to speak, at attacking downhill, getting into the lane, taking advantage of the lack of rim protection that the Boston Celtics have. I think we could be looking at a different series if Dallas had continued that road in Game 3, but we're still sitting here at 3-1. Boston is ahead, 2 home games remaining. Dallas has to win all 3 of the remaining games. I don't think this really changes the course of the series, but I do think Dallas finally came with the right mentality and the right approach here, and that is to be commended.
Yeah, I mean, at least they didn't fall over and just say, hey, let's get swept and move on to the offseason. But you're right. It would have been nice to see this performance in Game 3 where, then we would have came into Game 4 tonight going, man, we could maybe have a 7-game series here. We could really have something. And they just weren't able to. I've said going back to the first round that I don't really think Boston is in for a series until they lose their second game of the series. We saw them lose Game 2 in the first and the second round of these playoffs, and they went on to win in 5. So right now, all we've done is Dallas isn't going to get swept. Maybe it puts a little chink in the armor of Boston in terms of they lost 3 playoff games in this run instead of only 2. If Dallas goes to Boston and win, where Boston hasn't been insane at home throughout all of these playoffs over the last 3 years, then maybe we're talking about a really, really interesting game 6. And you're right. I thought Dallas found a few things in terms of attacking downhill. Dereck Lively crushed Boston on the offensive boards, and the Dallas defense had multiple efforts from multiple players. And here's why I think Dallas can go into the next game and say, we may have a chance. Do you know what Luka and Kyrie shot from 3 tonight?
It wasn't good. I know that. I would guess they maybe made 2 or 3 and took like 15. Like it felt like they took a bunch. And yeah,
1 of 14, Sam. Luka,
oh wow.
Luka and Kyrie were 1 of 14, and they each played over 30 minutes. So, you know, the subs came early or late third quarter, but those guys still had already played 30 minutes, scored 29 and 21 respectively. Luka, Kyrie, 50 total points, 1 of 14 from 3, which made Kyrie 9 of 12 from 2 and Luka 12 of 18 from 2. So it wasn't like some outlandish 3-point shooting performance. Really, if you look at the team stats, it's because Tim Hardaway Jr. went 5 of 7. Morris hit 1. Lively hit 1 tonight, actually 1 of 1. Exums were important. I thought he came in and played well. I thought Josh Green came in and gave some like just intensity level plays. But at the end of the day, to me, this was about the tone that Luka set. And it's the tone that Luka set on the defensive end of the floor. In the first quarter alone, Sam, I thought he had at least 4 very impactful plays where ISO versus Tatum, he holds up, deflects a skip pass out of bounds, steals one from Jrue Holiday, and then makes a rotation and jumps a 1 more passing lane. And he set the tone for his team and his team's defense that he was going to contribute on that end tonight.
I agree with all that. I think Luka was so good on the defensive end of the court tonight, comparatively to what we've seen. I don't know if he saw the Brian Windhorst thing. I don't know if he just like decided to step up, whatever it was. It was clear that there was a different intent to his game defensively, and I think he deserves an immense amount of credit for that. What else? I'm glad you brought up Dereck Lively. I thought Dereck Lively gave them an enormous lift in this game. It was by far his best game of the series, it felt like to me. I thought Boston just had like a little sense of the yips around the basket. Like, I don't know what that was. Jrue Holiday missed like probably 3 or 4 bunnies. Jason Tatum missed a few bunnies. Obviously like Jaylen Brown had just like a really, really rough game, goes for 10 points on 3 of 12 from the field. This was the floor for the Celtics, to be sure. This was a really, really rough, really, really poor game that we saw from them, I think is a fair way to put it. You have thoughts?
Well, I was just the other thing is I felt like the Mavs did do a good job responding every time it looked like Boston may get something going. So there was one that stood out to me. I think it was towards the end of the first quarter. It was after the jump ball that Hauser won and Derek White hit probably a 32-footer or something at the end of the shot clock. And I was like, oh, those are the types of plays that all of a sudden get the momentum for Boston. And Dallas came down. Kyrie hit a tough 3 on the only one he made on the ensuing possession. Dallas got a stop, and then I think it was PJ Washington hit a 3 on the possession after that, and they kind of regained momentum. So I thought Dallas did a good job of being able to answer anytime it looked like Boston might get a chance to make, because we've seen Dallas build leads in this series, Sam. That's what's crazy. We've seen them do it, and then they've just never been able to stop Boston runs.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think everything here is fair. This was like a catastrophic game in the second half. It felt like to me. I mean, it was over by the middle point of the third quarter. The Celtics had, put in the, waved the proverbial white flag, putting in, Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser. And I think Luke Cornett got third quarter minutes, right? Like this is
O'Shea
where
Brissett.
We were. O'Shea Brissett was in, and then like Jordan Walsh came in late, and like it was, this was a game in the second half that was just unwatchable at a certain point. But again, I want to give kudos to Dallas because they deserve an immense amount of credit. I'm really glad as well that, Dante Exum entered the rotation. This is something that I've been surprised that I haven't seen from them more often, is them being a little bit more willing to play Dante. Like the fact that they're playing Jaden Hardy and Dante like right around the same number of minutes is kind of weird to me. I feel like Dante has just been more impressive and steady when I've seen those two throughout the course of the year this season. Yeah, the whole thing was quite bizarre in the second half, but I think that in the first half we saw the approach that Dallas, I think, should have been taking throughout the course of this series. And now it comes down to, I mean, like Boston is still, it's such a massive advantage here, and that can't be overstated. And I don't want to act like I think this is some, window opening. Like, I still think Dallas has like a 1% chance to win this series, right? I don't think it's 0, but like it's still low at the end of the day. We've never seen a team come back from 3-0. Right? Especially not against a team that won 60 games in the regular season, has been as good as Boston has been. I will say that, like, if Porzingis continues to sit out, I am at least like intrigued to see if Dallas just continues to attack the rim, because Boston doesn't have a great counter to that approach at the end of the day. And their counter would really just have to be increased ball pressure and stopping them from getting into the lane. And that's really hard with Luka and Kyrie on the other side of the court.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you want to close games out because you never know what's going to happen. Ankles turn, guys get hot, guys go cold. And so all it takes is another Kyrie 40 bomb, or but a Kyrie 40 bomb, or Luka goes insane for a game, or another Tatum goes cold, or we've seen PJ Washington get hot for an entire series. What if that happens? We see Dereck Lively getting comfortable now. So I'm with you. If I had to bet money, I would bet that this series is over on Monday in Boston. But you want to close out series when you get a chance, because there is always these outlier instances that could happen. And if it doesn't have to happen every game, it could just happen. A rolled ankle in game 5 could now change the trajectory of the rest of the series. Dallas goes home in game 6, and then we know how game 7s are. I don't think that's how it's going to play out, but this is why you want to close things out whenever you have a chance. The other thing, you could tell Dallas was very free tonight. I thought that stood out to me as soon as Dereck Lively took that 3 in the corner early in the game.
Yep.
To me, that said, we're kind of throwing caution to the wind. It didn't look like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jaden Hardy were going to play. I don't think they were going to play in the rotation. Jason Kidd had made his mind. It was going to be Josh Green, Exum, Kleba, and then the big man rotation with Gafford and Lively. And I think a lot of guys played very free for Dallas tonight. I think they can play free on Monday as well. But as you start to make this comeback, then you start to feel a little bit of that game pressure yourself again. And so the advantage was Dallas tonight with nothing to lose. We'll see how Monday goes. I would expect Boston is ready to go, and Dallas better be ready to match that energy early in the game.
Yeah, like, I'll be interested to see how Joe Mazzulla reacts to this, because like on some level, Joe Mazzulla seems like a crazy person, and like they talk about that, about how he like enjoys the negative moments in a real way. But like, how do you even react to this where like you pulled your guys within the third quarter, and like it was just very clear that this was a throwaway game by the time they were down 25? You know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to approach that. I don't know how we're going to go about that this season, but we shall see.
If I was Jason Kidd and that coaching staff, or if I'm Luka Doncic's best friend or trainer or agent or whatever, I would take this opportunity to show him the game 3 defensive effort he gave and the game 4 defensive effort he gave, and just say, Luka, this has to be the ultimate learning experience for you. Look at your body language in between plays. Look at your body language when you bring your teammates together. Just look at the difference, and then believe in whatever you believe in, whether it's basketball gods or karma or the game reward, whatever people believe. Like, I don't care. It's all the same thing. And you got rewarded tonight. There was one tonight where he drives in, Drew Holiday strips him, and he fell down. And usually Luka's reaction when he falls down is what? Throws his hands up, looks at the officials, whatever. Instead, Sam, he gave a second effort where he kind of crawled on the floor, tipped the ball away. Kyrie went and got it in the corner. And you know who got the and one pass bucket? Luka Doncic. To me, it was the ultimate microcosm of just play the game the right way, and you might be the best player in the world. But whenever you act like you did in game 3, you're really talented, but that doesn't win championships.
This is some Bryce Simon, old man yelling at a cloud in Kansas right now. Basketball take, and I love it. Yeah, look, like Luka's performance, I think in game 3 was pretty unacceptable. I think everybody knows that. You can't foul out of a game with 4.5 minutes left in it when it's a close game. Like, you just can't let that happen. And yeah, it was disappointing from Luka, but I thought tonight was everything that he should have been throughout the series, and it was a great response and deserves a lot of credit for that. Now we go back to Boston. It is 3-1 Boston. Look, I'm still expecting a Boston win, but we'll see where it goes. I actually do think that the Dallas strategy of attacking the basket aggressively, having Dereck Lively come in and just crash the offensive glass as hard as he can, is an effective way to go about things, as well as pushing the tempo. Like, those are the 3 things that I think Dallas can do in order to exploit its matchup-based advantages against Boston. I will be interested to see how Boston adjusts to that. Do they try and slow the game down in some way? Do they try and, play more effective basketball in another way? Like, how do they go about changing that tenor? But if they don't do anything to change that, strategic advantage and strategic goal, these are things that I actually do think Dallas has the ability to attack from the perspective of playing Boston.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I thought Dallas had a chance in this series was I thought they would have the best player in the series, and Luka was that tonight. I thought they could potentially have the 3rd best player in the series in some capacity, and Kyrie can still be that for 3 more games. And Lively and Gafford and the offensive boards and those things, especially if Porzingis wasn't going to play. I know going into the series he was, but I thought those guys could be effective down there. And so those things are still on the table. It's just they dug themselves such a big hole. I'm glad you continue to bring up the pace, because I think that's really important, Sam, that Dallas doesn't just try to walk it up and find a mismatch and get a switch that they want. No, push a little bit. It doesn't mean you have to score early. Create mismatches, create cross matches, get guys where get that early and then attack. And I thought they played with good pace tonight.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, are you ready to talk some NBA draft now?
Yeah, I think we've exhausted as much as we can here.
Yeah, that was a rough basketball game to watch. I'm sure a lot of people are not here to talk about this game. I think people are probably here to talk about the NBA draft Q&A that we're going to do here. So we asked for questions from Twitter. I feel like we haven't answered a lot of questions from Twitter folks in a while, so we're going to do that. We will also answer some questions at the end from the YouTube folks. So if you do want to answer or ask us questions, we will be sure to answer those, but we're going to focus on some of the Twitter ones first, because I feel like we haven't answered those ones in a while. Sure. So let's start here. From Derek E. Sullivan: with the first round only on the first night, is it safe to assume that green room invites have a guarantee? Absolutely not. That is absolutely not true. The NBA, when it sends out these invites, they have a vague sense of like what somebody's draft stock is, but they don't like know what teams have like, promised which players, right? So no, the answer there is absolutely not. It is not safe to assume that green room invites have a guarantee.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I had the same thing, Derek, as you were asking here, as I'm looking through this, because I think one of the names that stood out to me was actually Keyshawn George is a name that has accepted, even I think was on the list, accepted, I think is right. But I mean, I think they end up with 20 guys there. I just don't think you can guarantee that all 20 of those guys are going to go in the first round. And like you said, at this point, the NBA doesn't know who's guaranteed what and all of that. All of that stuff is such a mystery. So I would assume that they have some decent intel, but I also would assume, Sam, you would have a better feel on this than me, that there's some name recognition that goes along with this and some other factors that decide the players that they would want there and the ones that they invite.
Yeah, I would imagine that that's like a little bit of it. But I would also say that, like, for instance, like Keyshawn George, right? Like, you and I are not wildly high on Keyshawn George.
Yeah, I don't think he's guaranteed first round.
Yeah. I think that there is a very good chance he goes in the first round. I wouldn't say that there's like, a lock or anything. I've heard there are teams around the league that are like mixed on Keyshawn George to the point where if he ends up not in the first round, wouldn't surprise me. But I expect him to go in the first round, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Based off of what I have been, kind of told by teams, I have a vague sense of kind of who is in that ballpark. Like you and I think are generally a little bit lower on Johnny Furphy.
Yeah.
I would expect Johnny Furphy to end up in the first round. And I don't really see a way that like he doesn't end up hearing his name called in the first round, kind of. Like he has too many outs, I think, in that like 12 to 28 range, basically. So no, I don't think they have a guarantee. I do think it is players that have draft stock around the league that is fairly high, but I do not think that, honestly, just based on the law of large numbers, the way that John Gavoni is reporting these things, he said there will likely be 25 invites, of which Zach Edey has already declined one of them. Truly, if you invite 24 players to the green room, one of those players is coming back the next night, almost certainly. That's just the way it works, kind of based on the law of large numbers when it comes to the NBA draft, like, stock up and down game. I don't like them inviting that many players. I think that's a bad idea and kind of setting up for a weird situation where a kid's going to have to come back the second night. But if you're ESPN, like maybe that's like a drama thing that you want. I don't know.
By the way, it's not a second night, it's a second afternoon. And do you realize how early you have to get up for us to be live for the second round?
Yes, I am. But look, Bryce, I wake up at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. on the day where the draft is anyway, and the day before the draft. So it's not that big of a deal to me. Like I know that it's going to be bad. I'm aware.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Here's my other question. If you were an NBA draft pick, would you go to the green room or would you want to spend it at home with your family and friends?
Depend on what my stock is. I think it depends on like what the deal is.
Guaranteed first round. Like you're a lottery pick in some capacity.
Guaranteed first round. I'm a lottery pick in some capacity. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like an introvert, so like probably stay home. But
that's my answer. That's why I wanted to ask, because I assume at some point they push pretty hard. Like they want the number one pick there, top 5 guys, stuff like that. But I would want to be at home with my family, my friends, the people who helped me get me there and all of that. So I was just curious.
Yep. Okay. Question number 2 from Call in Sexton. Is Jakob Poeltl worth building around as a Raptor? How should you address his recent extension in Masai Ujiri's shoes? I think that he does not really fit the age timeline or the build of this roster. If I was Toronto and I'm building around Scotty Barnes particularly, I would want a center who can shoot.
Yeah. And
that would be like an enormous priority for me. I think Jakob Poeltl, I did this project where I kind of tried to figure out where Poeltl would rank in the NBA among centers. I think I had him like 18th or so, like right around there. Like guys that are just like indisputably better, like Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Rudy Gobert, Bam 4, Victor Wembanyama 5, Porzingis 6. I consider Karl Towns a center. That's 7. Domantas Sabonis 8, Chet Holmgren 9, Brook Lopez 10, Şengün 11, Jared Allen 12, Miles Turner 13, Mitch Robb 14, and then DeAndre Ayton 15. So like I think you're at least getting to 15 before you get to Poeltl, and that's before you say like Hartenstein, Ivica Zubac. I would personally have Zubac like definitely ahead. I think Zubac was awesome this season. And it went like way under the radar. And then like you're looking at like Wendell Carter, Nurkic, Claxton. I think Poeltl's like certainly in the mix with those guys. And like, if you wanted to rank Poeltl ahead, honestly, like there are probably guys in that mix that I would certainly rank Poeltl ahead of. But that's the group he's in. So like it's somewhere 16 to 20 22, let's say, in terms of what his ranking is. And he's a valuable player for sure. But I would, I would think he's not a guy for me that like I would be locked and loaded on building around. And if somebody was willing to present me with an offer, I would be pretty happy to take it, because I don't know how well it fits with Scotty Barnes when I'm trying to build like a contender long term.
Yeah, we traded him in the most recent mock. That was one of the moves we did make, and one of the trades we made. We moved him to Memphis. When you initially said 15 to 20, whatever, 16 range, I was like, man, that kind of seems low because he's a good player. But as you listed off the names, I don't know that I could argue. I don't think the debate gets real hot until, 14, 15. I think there's some, nuanced stuff there, but he's definitely not top 10. And I think what's more important is what you said to start. So you're looking at a center that's in the 15 range in terms of the entire league. And then he's not necessarily the ideal center for the Raptors at building around Scotty Barnes. As you said at the top, somebody who spaces the floor really makes a lot of sense for them. So because of that, I think he's on a good contract. He's a good player. You don't trade him for nothing. There were Raptors fans who didn't think that was good value with the move we made, and I get it. So you would want to move him for good value. You don't just move off of him for no reason. But I don't think he's a core player that you're saying, oh, we're keeping him no matter what, untouchable type of stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to for me. Like, I think he's a good player. I think he's definitely like a starting center in the NBA, like point blank. I think that like he's a good defender. I think that he is certainly a really good screener. I think that he is like somebody that really helps their guards get free. I think he's really developed as a short roll passer. But like, I really need a shooter if I'm building around Scotty Barnes, because I need to accentuate Scotty Barnes's gifts. It's why I really like the Kelly Olynyk move for them.
Sure.
And think it makes sense now that they've extended him. Like, my whole build at this point is around Scotty Barnes. Like, if Scotty isn't the guy, I am probably screwed if I'm them. Like, it's going to be hard to get the guy, I think, now that you've already you're going to pay Emmanuel quickly this summer. You have RJ Barrett on the books. You have Jakob Poeltl on the books. I think that I need to accentuate everything that Scotty Barnes can be in order to try to make him a superstar.
Yep.
And to me, I would want like more of a 4-out approach around him, as opposed to like the approach that, you have when you have Jakob Poeltl, who's like a non-threat outside of, 7 feet as a scorer.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. From Bailey Van Houten. What in the hell do the Pistons do at number 5? This is a great question. I'll let you start here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how the board falls. On our recent mock, if you guys have it, go check it out. We had a really good one, got some really good feedback. People thought it was well done, and we kind of decided within the middle of it that we would allow ourselves to make trades and made some fun picks and interesting picks. The way it fell that night, we, worked a trade back for Detroit. I thought it worked out really well. They traded back. Whether they can get that value or not is up to discussion, but they traded back, got a future asset, and then still were able to get Dalton Connect. I have a lot of Pistons fans, Sam, talking to me. I mean, I have someone DMing me literally as we're recording going, Steph Castle's moving up my Pistons board because they got Fred Vinson on the coaching staff, and his reputation is as a shot doctor or shot fixer, however you want to say it. And so I think because of that and his reputation, not to put too much pressure on him, but a lot of Pistons fans are opening themselves up more to some of the quote unquote non-floor spacers or shooters in this draft. And if Fred's that good at what he does, then I get it. That's an awesome hire and it makes sense. Matas, I think, is still very much a conversation here. I think if Reed Shepherd fell, he would be a great option. Donovan Clingan. It just really depends on how the board falls. And I think that here's the other thing, Sam, that I don't think we talk about enough. It's also what Trajan thinks he can do with the $65 million in cap space. What other moves are out there for the Pistons? Are they going to bring in Brandon Ingram? Because if they bring in Brandon Ingram via a trade that doesn't include number 5, that would change who I would pick. Or if they're going to sign Hartenstein or Stein, that would trade who I would pick at 5. I wouldn't draft him or sign him and draft Clingan. So it's kind of a cumulative of the entire offseason.
Oh boy, what are the Pistons going to do at number 5? That is a great question. I think that they are the most difficult team in the top 5 right now for me to kind of read, even with Atlanta. And like, I don't think Atlanta knows what Atlanta is going to do yet. Certainly. Like that continues to be what I'm told, that like Atlanta does not know what Atlanta is going to do at the end of the day. So we need to just consider all of that. And like, there could be some trade, like they could explore trades, like they could try and figure out who they're going to take at one. Like there are just so many options on the table for Atlanta. And that means there's a lot of potential like flexibility in terms of what this could look like in terms of who's there at number 5. Right. So we need to say that from the jump. What do I think they will look for? It's from what I gather from talking to other teams in that range, they are a bit of a wild card right now, and teams are struggling to figure out what it is exactly that Trajan is going to want, because Trajan Langdon has never really like been the top dog like in a draft room before. Like David Griffin has been his guy previously, right? Like he's been the number 1 guy. And then on top of it, in New Orleans, like Bryson Graham does a lot of their scouting stuff. Bryson Graham is like, he was now, I believe, their general manager in New Orleans, like has always been very, very involved in Detroit's scouting, or New Orleans's, like scouting department. So without Bryson Graham there, without Griff, like without a few, wherever Trajan was with Brooklyn, if I remember correctly previously.
Yep.
Like without knowing what his top priorities are, teams that like have people in their front office that know Trajan really well are struggling to know what exactly it is that he's going to prioritize most. So I don't know what they're going to do is the answer. I think that they will be open to a lot of different players. I like wonder if they could, we had them trading down in this thing. Like I've been like kind of wondering, is there a world where they can move up? And that's speculative. That's not me like knowing anything. Like I just kind of wonder if they really like a player, like say that the draft order works out. Let's go with, let's go Sar at 1, Clingan at 2, or Clingan 1, Sar 2. Is there a chance that they could decide, okay, the Rockets at 3 don't think that Reed Shepherd is going to go number 4, maybe, and they're willing to drop back down to number 5, but the Pistons decide they really want Zach Risacher, and maybe they're able to move up to number 3, right? Like, is that a world where something like that could happen? I don't know. Like, I kind of have been trying. Atlanta at the top really throws things for a loop, because I think there are so many different avenues that they could take. Like the thing that I would do right now if I was Atlanta, if I had any questions about Alex Sarr, if I decided Alex Sarr was not my player, I would probably call Washington and ask, hey, would you guys do 2 for 26? And I would pressure them, or 2 and 26 for number 1. And then I would pressure them by saying, hey, we have an acceptable offer for number 1. The team that is drafting, or the team that is moving up, is coming up for Alex Sarr.
Yep.
But we don't really want to drop quite as far as that. If you would do 2 and 26, that would confirm for you that you get Alex Sarr, we would do that, because we just want to drop back to 2, right? And then, Washington could end up with Alex Sarr. That would make sense. Then Atlanta could hit the market again, potentially, or they could take like a Donovan Clingan, or they could take Zach Risacher, like whoever they like, but they could hit the market again and say like, hey, Detroit, if you really want Zach Risacher, San Antonio, if you really want Zach Risacher, come up, get him, confirm it, and we'll go with it that way.
Yeah.
You know, like I wonder if there are different kind of trade scenarios where like Atlanta does like a multi-trade down, like a draft day style, like, you know, multi-trade down kind of thing. But this is why figuring out what number 5 is so hard right now. And I think Modest would be on the board. Like, I know I've seen some Cody Williams buzz recently. That's actually the next question I want to talk about here. So I'll just bring that up from Dane. Is Cody Williams rising or falling? Have heard both. I think Cody Williams ends up going somewhere in the top 10. I don't know that I would say he's rising or falling. I feel like he was probably always somewhat likely to go in the top 12 at least. And I would say his range continues to be in the top 12, I guess.
I was just gonna say real quick, J.R. Holden also came over from Brooklyn that led up their scouting department. So if people like, I don't know how much of Trajan's ear he will have in Detroit, but that's another factor into all of this as well, trying to figure out what the Pistons may do in terms of maybe you have to look at some of Brooklyn's drafts and, you know, figure that out. Cody Williams, yeah, he's right in that range. I've been a little lower on Cody Williams going even back to coming into the college season. I probably, still am right now compared to most people, but I still have him as a lottery pick, and I think he'll be a lottery pick. He is a player on my board who I assume goes higher than what I have. I think the Pistons at 5 is probably the high end outcome, but I don't know that 11, 12, both of those, Chicago and Oklahoma City, would seem to make sense. I don't see him really getting past 12 in that rate. I don't see him falling outside of the lottery, I guess I would say for sure.
Yeah, I ended up with Cody at 8 on my board. I think that his ballpark is somewhere, like you said, in that range. Do I think that he's like really in the mix for Detroit? Again, kind of hard to say at this point because everybody I talk to seems a little bit confused on what exactly Trajan Langdon is going to do at the top of this class. Okay. Let's go with this from Parker Fleming.
Yeah.
Who is the consensus non-lottery player with the best chance to pop? So Bryce, I haven't told you this yet, but at some point next week, like this coming week here, so either on Sunday or on Wednesday, depending on how the finals go, we'll figure out what we're going to do there. We're going to do like who are our guys in the 2024 NBA draft.
Sure.
This is kind of that question in some way to me. So you know what my answer is going to be. I'll let you kind of take the floor here.
Well, you know what my answer is going to be as well, though.
You're going to say Deron Holmes.
I'm going to say Deron Holmes. And you're going to say Bub Carrington.
I am. So explain why you think Deron Holmes in this circumstance.
I just think Deron Holmes is a dribble pass shoot. So we talk about skilled bigs, and I think that Deron Holmes showed that this past season, and people have started to question the shooting a little bit. I get it. It was a 1-year sample. The free throw percentage wasn't as good as maybe you would want, but I believe in the shot. I think he's going to be able to space the floor. I think he can put it on the deck. There's plenty of clips out there, games where you can watch him attacking closeouts. I think he's a good passer. He'll be able to do it out of the short roll at the very least. And then the other thing is, if you want to talk about floors, even if that stuff isn't as good as what I'm saying, he can be a pick and roll lob threat, a rim runner, have rim gravity, play in the dunker spot. He led the nation in dunks 2 years ago when he wasn't playing as much on the perimeter. And I also Kobe Brea was really good. He has some good play. He hasn't played with like a pick and roll maestro that he will play with in the NBA. His defensive impact may not be quite as good as it was in the A-10 in college, because he's not, 7 foot with insane length, but I think he's athletic enough. He played better with his hand activity this last season, and I think he will be a good, versatile defender. And the last thing I want to say is he was a very, very good defensive rebounder. I looked it up the other day. His defensive rebound percentage was barely less than Zach Edey and was actually better than Donovan Clingan. So when you're looking at teams who maybe just need big-time defensive rebounding, Deron Holmes can do that. His offensive rebounding was a little bit lower, but again, that's because he did end up playing quite a bit on the perimeter this last season.
That's right. So we'll talk about Duran, I would say, later this week. Again, we'll do this like when we have that conversation, and I'll give you some of my pushbacks on
Sure.
that then, because that'll be a little bit more fun. And
Yeah.
we'll just do like the positive side of this question now. My answer would be Bub Carrington. I think Bub Carrington has the exact kind of like competitive character that I really love. Like he is a real like wants to be like great player, and really like gives a shit about like winning and losing at the top. The thing about his skill set that I really love is he is like legitimately dribble pass shoot. He is a very creative pull up shot maker and shot creator. I think that the catch and shoot stuff will come around. Like I think he shot like 40% from three in his last 12 games at Pitt this year. It's such a small sample that I'm not going to like worry about it. But the shot is good. Clearly, like if you look at his pull up percentages, they're just like awesome, right? Like he is such a fantastic scorer. And the thing to worry about here is he is not a great driver of the basketball. Like he makes things very difficult on himself, in my opinion. Like doesn't get to the rim all the time. He doesn't have like that super athletic juice, right? What worries me about that is that it might lead to some inefficiency, but I also wonder like if he gets stronger, he has a lot of can keep guys on his hip, can keep guys like with that hostage dribble like on his back in order to create forward separation and continue to engage that drop defender. I also really love the way that he uses his stride length. I think that when he actually does decide to drive, I think he does really, really get into effective areas. It's just that he really does like to pull up in a real way. And he has like a lot of different moves to be able to get into that pull up. I think his deceleration is absolutely elite in terms of being able to get that separation from his man. And on top of it, he can really pass like 2-to-1 assist turnover ratio, over 4 assists per game as a freshman, as an 18-year-old playing college basketball. The frame continues to improve. I'm a big Bub Carrington guy. And look, he might end up in the lottery, like wouldn't totally blow my mind, but I would say, I guess, like if we're talking about consensus guys that could end up in the lottery or that are non-lottery guys right now, I would guess that he is one to me.
Yeah, I was trying to look through my list and figure out who's the guy or who is a player that I really believe in outside of the names we've already said. Because as you know, I'm a big fan of Bub Carrington as well. I don't have him as high as you, but I actually do have him in my lottery. But I agree, he's probably not consensus. I would say on my board, Jared McCain is a guy I really like that's not in my lottery, but is he considered consensus lottery at this point or no?
I would say not consensus, but I do have him as a lottery guy. I really believe in Jared as well. I'm with you. I'm a big believer, but let's not spoil the show we're going to do, later this week. Right.
Okay.
I've seen this question a couple of places, also in the comments here. Who is your favorite trade up candidate for the Timberwolves if they package 27 and 37? I would probably not package those two picks, would be my take. I don't think they would get that far up the board. Like the only spot I think they could possibly get to there is 22, maybe, if Phoenix like decided they just wanted to add an additional asset and that was the best offer that they got. I don't know if that'd be the best offer that they get, frankly. Like I would think the Knicks could consider offering 24, 25, and 38 maybe, which is a more attractive package, obviously, to get up to 22. But like, if I was the Timberwolves, I would just take two swings at the apple as opposed to that. Like, I think that, you can probably get like a similar quality player at 27 as you could jumping up into 22. And then, take a second flyer on somebody at 37, like a Leonard Miller, like they did last year, like a Josh Minot, like they did the year before.
Yeah, I mean, so that would be interesting for me as well, based on how my tier breaks right now. Trading up from 27 and 37 would get them into another tier, but I don't know that that's worth 2 bites of the apple in the next tier, which I have going to 38. So I guess you'd have to kind of weigh that in terms of, do you want 2 guys in that tier or one option in the tier above? I think I'm kind of with you. I'm intrigued by this tier of guys I have late first, early second round. I don't know if that's who will actually be there or not, of course, but I think there are some interesting prospects in that range. Yeah, my immediate thought was, well, I don't think you could even get one of the Knicks picks with that anyway, because they don't want to acquire more picks, right? Like they're not trading out of one to get two.
Milwaukee's not trading out of 23 to get a second and third pick because they already have 33. 26 would be Washington. I don't think you want to move up one spot to do that. New Orleans, I guess, but like, New Orleans had the ability to have 2 picks in this draft. They could have taken 17 from the Lakers and kind of decided against that. Plus, like, they have to figure out what they're going to do with their roster,
And I think at 21, New Orleans probably has a big man on the board that would seem to make a lot of sense for them, that if they trade back to 27, I'm not saying he automatically, but Phoenix could take a big if they're keeping it. Milwaukee could take a big. New York could take a big. Washington could take a big if they haven't already. You could see a couple of those guys off the board by the time you got back on the clock at 27.
So, like, what is a home run draft maybe for the Timberwolves? Let's say, I think it'd be like Tyler Kolek, getting your backup point guard, potentially point guard of the future next to an Anthony Edwards. And if you can retain Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the next offseason.
Yeah.
As well as, plus you obviously have Mike Conley. He can grow and mature under Mike for a year. And then at 37, you could maybe end up with like like Ryan Dunn would be really fun to me. Maybe you can take a flyer on a Nikola Jurisic or an Antonio Reeves, like something like that.
So in this, Ryan Dunn, Justin Edwards, like I have Keyshawn George in this range. I assume Keyshawn probably thinks he's going to, we talked about that, probably a first round pick. Cam Christie, I know you have a little higher. You think Cam Christie feels like he's a first round pick, but because he stayed in, or is he going to be in this range still?
Yeah, I mean, 27 Cam Christie makes a lot of sense to me.
So I was talking 30. I was talking 37. Sorry.
So like, Z Sommerfeld in the comments asked, the Timberwolves have shown propensity to pick wings in recent drafts. Like, do you think it's realistic they could pick AJ Johnson at 27 or 37? I think that this stands as well for what I'm about to say about Cam Christie too. I think that if they wanted Cam Christie or AJ Johnson, I would take them at 27. Like if I decided that like those were the guys I really wanted, I would confirm that I'm going to get them.
What about Hakoum Dadier? Same thing.
Yeah, like I think he could go anywhere in the 30s. So the 30s is hard. We've talked about that. Like there are just so many potential trades that could be made in that range, right? There are a number of different teams looking to package picks because a lot of the teams in that range have multiple picks that could be looking to consolidate, or the second day of the draft could end up, allowing teams to move up and down the board a little bit easier. So yeah, I think that that's kind of how I would answer that.
Well, then what they could do is they could wait at 37 and take Jamal Shed or AJ Mitchell or KJ Simpson. If you really like him that early in the second round, you could just flip, which ones you drafted and find that backup point guard at 37.
Yep. No, I agree. 10 picks is a lot though in a draft. If you really like somebody, I think you got to take them at 27 as opposed to like trying to hold off on them at 37. At the end of the day.
Yep.
Okay. From Zach Rudine, how does the depth of the class compare to 2023? I think once you get to the late lotto and back end of the first round, this class looks great compared to the past ones. It's a deep class. I know how I feel about this. I feel like we haven't talked a ton about this yet.
We've talked
how do you feel about this?
So we've exchanged a few text messages about it. I was just kind of going through last year's class. I didn't have an official big board last year, but I don't know. I still think the sweet spot is into the lottery through the mid first round into the early 20s. I like the class there. I'm intrigued in the range that we just talked about, kind of the late first, early second. I don't know that I love some of those guys, but I'm intrigued with some of those names. And then that's about it. I think that's where the sweet spot is for me. So I think this is obviously a flat draft at the top. I think the value gets quality as you get into the middle of the first round. And then maybe it's about normal or starts to get a little bit weaker in depth. I don't think it has crazy depth. And then there's some stuff late in the second round I'm not super excited about.
Yeah, so I think the sweet spot of this draft, I agree with Zach, is probably around like the 8 to 18 mark. That's the area that you and I have been talking about for a while. You could extend that down to 20, I think. You could, kind of, extend that up a little bit if you want. It just depends on where your tier breaks are, right? I do think that there are quite a few interesting players in that ballpark that I quite like. I don't love this class's depth beyond that. I think that there are a number of like high upside swings, like AJ Johnson, Cam Christie, Pacom Dadier, like Keyshawn George, I guess fits in this mold. I consider like Jalen Tyson kind of in this mold. I know that he's a third year player, but he's like very on ball, right? I think if he hits, he's really going to hit. But I think there's a chance, like, if he ends up kind of not shooting in the NBA and the defense doesn't improve, like, it could be, like, really, like, not a great spot for him in the NBA. Like, it could be difficult for him to stick. So I see this draft, Bobby Klintman's another one. Nikola Jurisic is another one. Like,
Can Ryan Dunn shoot? Does Ryan Dunn figure out how to anything offensively?
There are a lot of, like, quite flawed players in this class, I think. And it could end up being okay. Ultimately, last year, I ended up with more guarantees than what I did this year. And I ended up with more guarantees because while I say that like this draft class has like a lot of high upside guys in that range, I mean, if you look at last year's draft in terms of like what was uncertain about some of those players, it's pretty wild. Like last year in that, like, let's say 32 to 41 ranking on my board. CD Sissoko, Julian Phillips, Rayon Rupert, Max Lewis, GG Jackson. That gets us down to 36. And then it was like I had Trace Jackson Davis at 39, James Najee, who's like a total upside flyer at 40, and then Jordan Walsh at 41, right? Like that, there were just a number of those like weird high upside swing guys where, could go one way or another, but I thought they were like interesting gambles at least. This year, like the further down that you go, I think it's more like these guys are just like older guys that are like borderline-y two-way NBA players. So this year I ended up with 39 guaranteed contracts. Last year, I think I was at like 41, 42. The other thing is that, looking through my tier lists, I think I do have more two-way grades this year than what I did last year. So I think there are more like interesting two-way flyers this year. But then I think that like the undrafted free agency class like falls off of a cliff this year.
Yes.
It gets it gets really, really bad. Like I had like Mo Gay, who got drafted last year at 63. I'm like not the biggest Mo Gay fan. Like I had Charles Bediako at 71 last year, who was like one of the best defensive players in the country in college basketball. Like this year, that's like the Bronny, Trenton Flowers, Judah Mintz, like Boogie Ellis, Taron Armstrong range, where it's just like, well, I don't know how I feel about that group in terms of like long-term NBA upside personally. So I think that I think there's a better two-way group in this year's class. I think there's a worse undrafted free agency group in this year's class. I think there are probably a couple fewer guarantee guys in this year's class than a normal draft, but I love that mix from like 8 to 18, 8 to 20, 8 to 22.
Yeah, I mean, my second round, as I look through it, is filled with older Keyshawn Johnson, KJ Simpson, Harrison Ingram, Jalen Bridges, Antonio Reeves, Kevin McCullough, Jamal Shedd, PJ Hall, Isaiah Crawford, Quentin Post, Dylan Jones, Cam Spencer, Pelle Larson, Enrique Freeman. Like these, even Trey Alexander, these are guys that are older that I don't, like you said, I don't know that they're super high upside, but maybe they're two-way NBA players who fill out a rotation. But once I get past that group, I'm like you. I have a few more that I think are interesting. I have 25 players here that is in a tier that I just am like, I don't know how I'm excited. Like I'm not super excited about these guys, even as two-way guys or whatever, they'll be fun to watch at summer league, but I'm not sure I would be super pumped about a two-way thing for them. So I don't think that is as enticing as maybe some years.
All right. So let's talk about the Terrence Shannon thing. So Sean Christmas asks, outside of the legal matter, why isn't Terrence Shannon being looked at from a pure basketball perspective? It's hard to find any glaring weaknesses in his game. Aside, really strong disagree with that.
Yeah.
I get the ceiling thing with his age, but his floor is starter level. Are there any other character work ethic concerns? I'm not going to go into like the character work ethic stuff. You guys know that I don't really love doing that too often. I think Terrence Shannon is like a flawed prospect, even on the basketball court. I love the athleticism, but I really worry about the shot. I don't think he's like a consistent 3-point shooter at this point, especially off the catch, which is where he really, really needs it. And then additionally, like you go watch that, like, Illinois, Connecticut game, right? Where you're looking at Donovan Clingan having like one of the best, prospect games of the season, right? One of the reasons he did is because Terrence Shannon's like feel for the game was really poor, I thought, where he just repeatedly attacked and drove like right into traffic the whole game. And like that just doesn't work in the NBA. Like you really need to have like a stronger feel for the game to hit like passing kick and like be able to maneuver around. Like a lot of his game this year was based on being bigger, stronger, faster than everybody else. And I don't know that flies in the NBA. He's a great athlete by NBA standards. Even.
Yeah.
So I think he probably is a like rotation player in some way, shape, or form. I don't think his floor is starter level at all. But there are some, like I have him at 31 on my board. I would expect that I think his draft range is somewhere like 20 to 40 at this point. And, now that he has been acquitted of the rape charge that, he just had his trial for this week, the reason I haven't been ranking him in the mock draft prior to this is simply put that if this trial for any way, shape, or form would have been delayed, which like you never know with the legal system for whatever reason, right? I don't think he would have been selected with this whole thing hanging over his head. But with this being out of his, this thing is moved past him. He's been acquitted. It's time to move forward and consider him from a basketball perspective. I do think there are personally flaws in his game from a prospect perspective. I have him at 31. I think he's an interesting prospect, but I also think that there is some upside if he can figure out some of the passing and playmaking things and like the feel for the game. But he's older now. Like I think he turns 24 before he'll play an NBA game. So like it's hard to project that stuff at that age, right?
Yeah, I mean, he turns 24 not long after Summer League will be played. I'm with you. I have him in that same tier of end of the first round, top of the second round. I had just had him on my board kind of at the end, just waiting to see how this played out before we talked about him and any of those type of things. And, the shooting is interesting because 35% for his career on over 500 attempts. He is almost an 80% free throw shooter, which gives you a little bit more confidence, but barely a positive assist to turnover ratio for his career. So that kind of plays into some of the decision making. He does have real twitch and explosion, can find creativity with his finishing. Defensively, I think he will wow you with some highlight blocks and steals and some of those things that come with that athleticism. It's just as he can be able to harness it and, like you said, kind of show that feel and that nuance within the way he plays. So I would argue more that his upside is a starter. That's not his floor, as it was, put into the question for Terrence Shannon Jr. And that's why I would have him more of the late first, early second round. And as you mentioned, he is a little bit older. And I know people will go back, right at Dalton Connect. And I've explained why I hold Dalton Connect in a little bit different regard in terms of the age multiple times. And that's not Terrence Shannon Jr. He spent 5 years at major Division I programs throughout his career. So I think he's interesting. I love the athleticism. maybe he can really, really score it. Maybe he really locks in defensively, but I don't think he's a non-flawed prospect. I don't think this off the court situation was the only reason that he wasn't a lottery pick or something like that.
Yeah, I would agree personally. 34% on catch and shoots from 3 this season was much better as a pull-up shooter, actually. And like, that's just like not going to be his game at the NBA level, especially early. The year before at Illinois, he was 31% on catch and shoot threes. So yes, like you can look at it and say like he has consistently, made 35% of his threes on real volume, but I just don't, I'm just not like an enormous fan of the on ball guys that like have to make the transition to off ball, or they have to be on ball and like don't have a ton of like feel for the game in terms of passing and playmaking. Seriously, like he is I'm going to drive into the lane, try and draw contact, get fouled. Like that's the whole game kind of thing for him a lot of the time.
Yep.
Okay. From Danny Neckel, where do we see the Virginia guys going? Ryan Dunn and Reese Beekman. I would say Dunn's range is anywhere like 20 to 40, and then Beekman I would say is probably 40 to undrafted. If he heard his name called like right around 40, it wouldn't blow my mind. But Reese Beekman's going to be on a 2-way, I would imagine, to start his career. Ryan Dunn, I think, will probably get a guarantee to start his career. And that's really like kind of what matters.
Yeah, I don't have anything from my personal board that goes against that. I have Ryan Dunn right there on a fringe first round pick. We've talked about it. The defense is incredible. We talked about it all year. I mean, you made the case how ridiculous it was that he wasn't at least a finalist for defensive player of the year, if not win it. So we both really believe in the defense. It's just, what is the offense? My thing is, what is the value of maybe him if he's only an 82 game player, if he can only play in the regular season, but not in the playoffs? I think those guys still have some sort of value, but where does that value come in terms of an NBA draft? Reese Beekman, funny enough, the first conversation Sam and I ever had was about Reese Beekman. And so that goes back to obviously even before this time last year. So I guess we've known each other for a little over a year now, but yeah, the very first call was some Reese Beekman conversation. Like it's hard to know, how much juice he actually has in that Virginia offense. Can he shoot it? What does he do on the ball? Can he really create? He's interesting, but yeah, I think if he's drafted in the second round, I get it. Wouldn't be shocked if he goes undrafted, but definitely a guy that needs to end up on a 2-way.
From Ben Glover, if you ran the Jazz, would you specifically tank in 2025 and 2026 to avoid conveying their first, make a deal to resolve the issue, or just let things play out naturally? That pick is top 10 protected next season, top 8 the following, then becomes cash. Look, they're a Western Conference team in an absolute bear of a Western Conference. To me, like I would probably be tanking because I just don't see their route to a top 6 seed right now. And like if I could end up with like Ace Bailey, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, like whatever prospect you want to bring up, right? That seems more valuable to me. I would at least tank next year if I was them. I don't know about 26 yet. Like to me, it's not about the keeping your pick or anything like that. It's more about, to me, I need like the guy next to Lowry, because I don't think Lowry is like their number 1 on a great team. I think Lowry is like a number 2 on a great team. I think he's really great, but I still need my guy. I would still try and like extend Lowry this summer, renegotiate and extend him, give him real money. But yeah, to me, like I think I can still tank while having Lowry as my number 1 option.
This is what's really interesting to me about these teams that go through a rebuild. And, the Jazz probably did as good as anybody whenever they started this and traded Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert and the hauls they got for both of those guys. And it's like, oh, they have this treasure chest of draft picks. But you look at 2025, they have potentially three picks, Sam, their own, the Cavs, and the Timberwolves. And the thing is, both the Cavs and the Timberwolves could be picks in the 20s again, right? And so,
Yep.
like, all of a sudden, you feel great. I'm not saying what they did was wrong, but it just doesn't automatically that you're going to be able to build this thing out with stars just because you have a bunch of draft capital. And because of that, their own pick all of a sudden becomes the by far most valuable of those three, because the two other ones look to be not great in terms of draft picks and getting a star player. So, yeah, I would. That 2025 class, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, I'm sure we'll get into it in August or down the road whenever we need content. It's not just a Cooper Flag draft for everybody out there. There's Ace Bailey, and there's some other dudes as well that will show up and be good. I'm not saying it's 6 or 7 guys, but you get in the top 5, top 3, and I think you could be pretty excited coming out of this draft, that draft 2025.
From what looks like an Atlanta Hawks fan, biggest differences between Johnny Furphy and Zachary Risacher. Is the rankings gap justified? For me, yes. I think that those two are not really similar as prospects. I think that Risacher is so much more fluid on the ball, even though I don't love him as like an on-ball player because he's not explosive at all. I think that he is much, much, much better defensively in a team concept. I think he's better on the ball defensively too, honestly. I think he's a better passer. Like, I just think he's like better in a lot of different respects.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I was going to say is defense. As big a, we've been fans of Furphy throughout. We've given him love and all of that, but we've critiqued the defense, throughout the whole process with him and said that it needed to get better. And, Risacher, I definitely think offers more there. And so, that's the first thing. Also, like, at the end of the day, Risacher just shot better from 3 as well. Furphy was 35% from 3. Risacher was 39% from 3 and on a bigger sample size and more games. So I would say the one thing Furphy has is he's more athletic, especially in the open court. Would you agree with that? I think he has a little more juice athletically.
Plays with a little bit more speed, maybe, I would say. Yeah. I think that's right.
That's about all I would give him, I think, for sure. So,
okay. From Hawks thoughts, and we'll go through these names pretty quick. With the prominence of 5 out in this series, can you examine the prospective viability of the schematic fit for each of the major big man prospects in this cycle? I think this is a great question. This is something I talked about on Hoops Tonight with Jason Timpf. And again, once the finals end, I think you and I will have that discussion in terms of what does this playoffs, this series, like everything, what does that mean for the future of the league? And what did this season like teach us about team building moving forward? I think that comparing this to the draft is like a very good and specific way to think about it. I think Alex Sarr has a real chance to be able to play 5 out at some point. Yep. He has a lot of outs to be able to do so as well. Like, if the shooting doesn't come, I do wonder if he can be like an attacking player in some way. He can certainly play in dribble handoffs. He's like very comfortable with the ball away from the rim. But I think at some point he's probably going to shoot it. I think he has enough touch to do so. I think that like he just fits as a 5 out guy. Donovan Clingan is a more interesting point of comparison to me. Clingan, I think, will need to be like a truly, truly elite defender. Like, for it to work. Like, I think he will have to be a amazing defensive basketball player to stay on the court like Rudy Gobert. I think that world exists where he's that good, and that's why he's a top 5 player in this class. But like, there are some playoff questions that could arise with Donovan Clingan, I think is what it's fair to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ticket offensively is also how good is the passing. We saw that from Dereck Lively tonight with some of the decision-making he was able to make. But can Clingan operate DHOs? Can he make those passes? Can he short roll catch and make the passes out of that? And then how good is the play fitting? I think you see somebody at his size, but can he get to the rim fast enough to get behind a drop coverage defender? How vertical can he get when he's on the move and gets a bump from a tag guy and those type of things? Yep. So how, there's a little more nuance to those things than I think what people give it credit for sometimes. Just because he's massive doesn't mean he's going to be a great play finisher. I'm not saying he won't be good. I'm just saying it doesn't mean he automatically is, in the way that we've seen Lively be huge for Luka Doncic. So for me, for Clingan, he needs to be with good DHO partners, good lob passers, and a team that maybe could utilize his passing, because that's what he's going to be asked to do, and has shooters around him where his lack of floor spacing isn't going to be some sort of big issue.
So Kyle Filipowski, this is why you and I think like Filipowski a little bit more.
100%.
Is I think he has a chance to be like a dribble pass shoot 5 in a way that's like really valuable come the playoffs. I also think his defense is a little bit better than what it gets credit for being, which is why I have him as a top 16 player in the class. But, you know, if you think the defense is a little bit worse, I think that would create some real questions about what his fit is.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I told you this before we did the mock, that I finally, to try to help hash out my board, I put the things I really valued, and stretch, rim protection, big, just this archetype that we're talking about became like the number one priority for me. If I can get that guy's going to be a little bit higher in my tiers. Now there's obviously percentage chance outcome and those type of things. And there's a chance that he doesn't dribble, pass, and shoot. You know, I think in some ways it can be considered a little more theoretical than practical and all those type of things, in the same way that somebody could argue with Deron Holmes when I say dribble, pass, shoot. But I believe with the eye test that Kyle Filipowski is a skilled big, and at his size, he's able to move a little bit on the defensive end. If he's neutral defensively, Sam, and his dribble, pass, shoot on the offensive end, that's really, really insane value.
Zach Edey and Yves Missy, I think, like concerns in this regard, right?
Yeah,
like they might just be like like it might be harder for them to play in the playoffs. Missy, I think, would have to be like elite in terms of perimeter defense for it to work. It would have to be like elite in terms of energy. Edey, I think, is just going to have to, you know, get the most out of his tools and be the kind of guy that just punishes mismatches at a super high level.
My thing with Missy is Clingan can probably survive without being an insane lob finisher and those. I think Missy has to be that offensively. Like, I don't know what else Missy's bringing if it's not crazy high energy, rim gravity, rim running, just crushing people with that type of stuff. Maybe the skill comes around eventually, and then he's got to be really good on the other end. So I had somebody bring up something interesting with Zach Edey to me is he just best suited being a second unit big that takes advantage? Like, I don't know that would a second unit run their offense through Zach Edey? Just ball screen, roll, you force a mismatch, throw it to him on the block like they do at Purdue, and let him turn over his left shoulder, right hand hook.
Maybe.
And is that the best situation for him? Just the roll, go in there and just kill second units with his size?
Could be. Honestly, like that wouldn't blow my mind. I think he's going to be like a productive, good NBA player. So yeah, I'm with that. Two other guys here, Khalil Ware and Deron Holmes. We've kind of talked about Holmes already. He kind of fits this paradigm a little bit. Ware would really need to shoot it to fit this paradigm, because I don't love his feel as a passer, and I don't think he's super comfortable being able to play with the ball like on the deck or in dribble handoffs, like things like that. So he would really need to be a shooter, I think, to fit this paradigm.
But I think that's why, like, just the fact that he's flashed it a little bit. He only made 17 out of 40 and is below 70% career free throw percentage. But even the fact that he flashed it, I'm hanging on to it just a little bit. And that's why I've eventually moved him into my first round, is because he does have this size, this athleticism, and the potential to maybe stretch the floor. And it's redundant at this point. I find a lot of value in a big man being able to do that. So yeah, you're right. This was an amazing question, and it has definitely shaped my big board in this draft.
This question here from Brundon, could the Bulls be looking to move up in this draft or potentially package the pick with Vooch or Levine? Yeah, I mean, like, look, it seems like they're going to try and find a new home for Levine, right? Like, just based off of reporting, like it feels like that's a thing that they probably want to do. Whether or not they're going to be able to do it, we will find out. I think they would probably be more likely to try and attach like Caruso to this than use the pick to attach to it. If only because, like, if they trade Caruso, I would guess that they get, with 1 year left on his contract, a first round pick, and like maybe another pick, right? I don't think the first round pick is likely to be number 11 overall. So if you're trying to trade Caruso, or if you're trying to trade Levine, right, and you feel like you have to get a first round, you have to give back a first rounder in order to do so, I think it probably makes more sense to attach Levine or attach Caruso to Levine in order to move him, and then build that way. It would require them to like know that Caruso is like not re-signing an extension, like something like that. So, we'll see what that looks like. If I was Caruso, I wouldn't sign an extension because like my max number I think is like 18 or something like that for them. But yeah, I would probably look more that direction as opposed to like trying to package the pick with Levine to get off of that deal.
The interesting thing with Chicago moving up to me would be, we just talked about how they're actually sitting in the spot that we think could have good value in this draft. So you could have Cody Williams there at 11 for you. You could have Devin Carter there at 11 for you. So some of these guys, if you wanted to really take a swing on Tinjon Saloon or something like that, these guys could be there for you at 11 and you wouldn't have to move up. So I think that's what's interesting with them in terms of you're in the spot of the draft that we kind of like.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right. I don't know. Do you want to move to some
YouTube?
Let's move to a few YouTube questions before we get out of here, right?
Okay.
Okay. From Benjamin Staten. Why isn't Devin Carter ranked higher? From all reports, he's an elite athlete, high-level defender, elite rebounder, good driver, and three-point shooter. Yet despite this, he seems locked into the 8 to 15 range. So I have Devin Carter in the top 10. So I have him quite highly ranked. I think Devin Carter is all of those things. I do want to note that like the 3-point shot was like a 1-year thing. If he doesn't shoot it, I do think that the offensive side of the court like really breaks down.
Yep.
In a real way that is concerning. Having said that, like I agree. I think he's going to be an awesome defender. I think he's going to be an awesome like all around like playmaker. Like I saw someone in the Twitter questions ask like, is Reed Shepherd ceiling Dereck White? Like, are we watching both versions of Reed Shepherd ceiling and floor? Like, is his ceiling Dereck White and is his floor Peyton Pritchard? I kind of think of Dereck White as like, or I think of Devin Carter as like the Dereck White like parallel this year. I think Devin Carter has a chance, given his athleticism, to be like a remarkable defender. And if the shot is there, he's going to be so impactful on winning. But I do think it's a bet on the shot in a real way, not being a bit messier than what we hope.
Yeah, it's a great question, Benjamin, because I found myself asking myself this question just a couple weeks ago. Why do I not have Devin Carter right there with Reed Shepherd? Why do I not have him as a top 5 pick? Why do I not have him higher? And I have him as a top 10 player right now as well. And you could probably talk me into him making sense for San Antonio at 8 or something like that. And so, but what it came down to, because I believe in the defense, on ball difference maker, defend at least 2 backcourt positions, maybe with his size, how strong he is and his athleticism, maybe against some smaller wings. And then he also has disruption, impacts on the defensive boards as a perimeter player. I think offensively, I think he can play with the ball in his hands. I don't know that he's going to do it out of straight isolations, but I think he can use it in ball screens. But the thing is, I don't think he's going to play all the time on the ball. And like you said, does the jump shot hold up? So just for anybody, like he had never shot over 30% from 3 until this season. Last year at Providence, less than 30% from 3 on 3.5 attempts. This year, he jumped it 38% on 6.5 attempts, career 72% free throw shooter. So the numbers are, I don't want to say concerning, but they give you enough pause to go, you're not guaranteeing it in the way Reed Shepherd shooting 50% from 3 in that way. And I do think the jumper, he shoots a moon ball. There's times it looks a little bit, I don't want to say funny, but looks a little bit different. So there's just enough questions for him with the shot to keep him right around 10 for me.
Yeah, I love Devin Carter though. He's
Oh
an
yeah,
awesome,
absolutely.
like met him in Santa Barbara, like awesome human being. Like everybody you talk to about him just has the absolute best possible things to say about Devin Carter. His like it was so funny in the workout that I was at. They do this workout where it's like you have to go back and forth, like making a shot, making 2 shots from every spot behind the 3-point line, basically. So you have to make like basically 10 shots in a row, kind of. He did it, I think it was in like whatever minute time, and like he beat like what their target minute total is. And this was after like an hour long workout, right? They finished with this, up and back thing in order to like, get endurance going and get everything going. He beats the target time and he's just like, no, I didn't do this well enough. Like I need to go again. And like, his trainer was just like, dude, like we have more workouts coming like this cycle, like it's okay like that you're here. And he's like, no, I'm going again. Like there was just like no, like you weren't saying no to him. He was going to go again. There was no question that he was doing this again. And that's just who he is. Like he's like a super high character guy and super hard worker. And I think that, I think teams have kind of fallen in love with that in a real way.
If the offense is what it was this last year, I mean, yeah, that's a top 5 player combined with the defense. That's a big time player.
Yeah, I love Devin Carter. Love his game. Absolutely love his game. Next question here. Who is the player Toronto's targeting if they're trying to move up? Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know. In fact, I would say Toronto is one of the teams that I have the least feel for right now, league wide. If I was trying to theoretically guess, I would say that they don't have a ton of those big wing archetypes that they've had previously, and that Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster and that front office have tended to really like. So you look at who that could be, like, Matas would make some potential sense there. Cody Williams, I think, would make some potential sense there. Like Tijan Salon, I think would make some potential sense there, right? Like if they wanted to move up, like, 8 spots or 6 spots, like I think Tristan Da Silva could make some sense in that respect. But they've tended to like the athletic guys a little bit more, which makes me think it's more like maybe a Matas, a Cody Williams, a Salon type. Like that would be the type that makes the most sense for me if they wanted to move up.
And then the other thing would be any of the bigs that we've talked about, of Kyle Filipowski, Deron Holmes, those guys, because of what we talked about earlier, Khalil Ware, maybe even a Tyler Smith in terms of bigs. And I know Smith is a little bit more of a forward, but to put around Scotty Barnes and space the floor. So I'm not saying they would have to, I don't think they would have to trade up necessarily for those guys. Maybe they would, based on, our boards, they might have to for 1 or 2 of those guys. But those guys would be interesting to me because Kelly Olynyk isn't going to be there forever, even though he does have an extension there. Getting the younger player in the mix would make sense to me as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know. That's all that I think we need to like really go through. If there's any, do you have any other?
Oh, I do have one. Yes, my guy Sean
Yeah.
Coleman sent me a DM. Was real complimentary of the pod and everything. He said he liked what we did with Memphis on the last mock, but he wanted to know who are the 2 bigs you think or we think Memphis would be interested in if Clingan was off the board.
I think Edie would be one of them, would be my guess. Just like the statistical profile, like ticks a lot of boxes for them. In terms of their past draft history, I think Edie like would make a ton of sense there, to be honest. I could see you selling me on Khalil Ware, and here's why. I don't think they'd take either of these guys at number 9. To be clear, either.
And he didn't specify that. He just said
100%. I think that they last year, with the decision to take GG Jackson, made me a little bit more curious that they might be willing with their core and like a core that they feel great about in terms of like competitive character, at least. Whatever you want to talk about with like, Ja Morant's off court decision making. I think he's opened up those questions justifiably, but like those dudes like are competitive on the court, and they really set the tone for the rest of the organization. And I wonder if they feel comfortable bringing guys like Gigi Jackson and like Khalil Ware. Like, again, we need to be transparent and upfront about the fact that at Oregon, it was not great in terms of like Dana Altman, like asking him to do way more. And at Indiana, it was better this year. Right. And he really clicked, especially into the second half of the season. I wonder if they would be more comfortable with that than what I'm imagining, maybe is the way to put it.
Yeah, Edie seems to be the one that really, really stands out because you have Jaren Jackson Jr. already there to kind of space the floor and provide that. So a bigger body, and the Steven Adams kind of archetype of player and role that really defends or really rebounds and is physical in the paint, drop coverage, all of that type of stuff, and then let Triple J roam and do that. So Edie makes the most sense there. I could see Khalil Ware. Misi seems maybe not as much. He a little skinnier, not quite that physical presence. But what do you think about how excited would you be about like Filipowski? Like if you put Filipowski with Jaren Jackson Jr., where now both of those guys space the floor. Does Flip hold up enough playing in ball screen coverage with Jaren Jackson Jr. helping off ball away from it? Like, do you think that could all work? Or do you like more of just like the Edie, the big physical inside, paint presence?
I think they would default more to the big physical inside paint presence, given how useful Steven Adams was for them, would be my guess. I think they would like to have like a great drop defender and then have Jaren Jackson like patrolling the back line, because they can also, the thing is that's their counter, right? Like that would be the thing that gives them multiple options. Like them having like a great drop big would be able to allow them to play drop and like have Jaren patrolling the back line. They also can go Jaren at the 5 and go smaller, right? Like that would be the way that they can cover their bases kind of across the board to me. So yeah, I think that's how I would answer that. They're one of the few teams that like has the 5 out answer already, unlike a lot of teams.
Yep.
Okay, so John Dykstra asked this question that is just beautiful. If Leonard Miller were in this draft, where is he on your board?
John. Why did you do this, John?
Yeah, Lenny would be at the back half of the lottery for me, like he was last year, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that. Where would Dereck Lively be in this draft if we knew what we knew about him as a rookie? Like we have all of the information we have, but for whatever reason, you just take him and you put him into the 2024 draft.
Ooh. 2 or 3 for me.
Okay, so this is where it came from, was when I went on the show with Schlecht and Fred Katz, the Athletic NBA show. Fred asked how many players, or maybe Andrew asked, how many players in the 2023 draft would be the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 class? I said, well, 3 100% would be. Like, no doubt.
No, and it's way more than that.
No, yeah. And then I said Amin would be.
Yes. The answer is Victor, Brandon Miller, Amen Thompson, Scoot Henderson. I think Kim Whitmore goes number 1. I think that's 5. I think Lively would be in the mix, 6.
But Lively wouldn't have been as a prospect though, right?
Not as a prospect, no.
No, this was a prospect question. First.
Okay.
They asked me first as a prospect question. And I said 4.
I think the answer is definitely 4.
Yes.
And I think depending on the team, it could be anywhere from 4 to 7 or so.
And then that question turned into, if we had their rookie year information, how many more players would be. And like Lively was the first one that kind of brought up. Would Lively be the...
Here's the real fun name with this. Does Gigi Jackson go number 1 in this draft class based off of what we know?
Because he's put the intel stuff to rest, right? I mean, that was a big part of why he fell.
Look, I don't know enough about that to be able to know. I know he played well this year. I'm not going to sit here and like, parse through the Gigi Jackson intel right now. But I think that like it's a conversation. I would take Sarr over Gigi Jackson still, but like I think it's a real conversation.
It was interesting because Fred brought up Dereck Lively immediately and said he thought he would be number 1. And my initial reaction was to push back, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think the answer is like 5 or 6 still for me.
Yeah.
So this draft starts at like 6 or 7 in a normal draft, basically. In terms of Leonard Miller, you were way lower on Leonard Miller, I'm sure, than I was last year. But like the answer on the Lenny question is like, somewhere 9 to 14. I don't know, 9 to 13.
Because you had him top 20 last year.
I had him at like 13 last year, like something like that. Yeah. But again, like in this draft class, that 8 to 18 range is what I really like. So like, I don't know that it would be terribly different in this draft class. From Raul, shout out for the super chat. Spurs draft Bronny or stash. I'm guessing that's at 48. And then would you rather Blake Wesley or Bronny James? My God, why is that a tongue twister for me? Is it like the start of the B like name and then the Y at the end? Blake Wesley or Bronny James? Okay. I think I would rather have Blake Wesley than Bronny. Blake was just way better as a freshman than what Bronny was. And Blake is like a decent defender, or was a decent defender at Notre Dame too. So like doesn't really have that to fall back on. And I would like if there's a stash, like if Juan Nunez was there at 48, like I would absolutely just take Juan Nunez at 48 and stash him. If there was like a weird stash option, like if Ariel Hookporty was there, like I would much rather stash Hookporty in Melbourne or over in Germany or something like that. I'd rather stash Montas Rupstavicius. Like I think there's a number of potential stash options that I would take over Bronny at the end of the day.
And we're getting those decisions soon, right? With the over
2 days.
The
2 days away.
Yeah, the non-college players have to withdraw by is it midnight on Sunday the same way it was midnight on the Wednesday or whatever it was for the college players?
I believe that's the date that is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll get some names of guys later in the draft that, aren't planning on playing college basketball next season if they don't stay in the NBA draft and find out their decisions. But yeah, we've had this Bronny conversation in terms of, we think there's a potential path to the NBA. This isn't the decision we would have made. He's probably going to get taken by somebody in the second round. Wouldn't be shocked if it's the Lakers. And I think he spends, his entire rookie year playing in the G League, and, we'll see how he develops the jump shot and if he can develop more on the ball and be able to attack closeouts and how impactful the defense could be. So.
Yeah. And the decisions we're most tracking there, in my opinion, are Dadier, Jurisic. I would throw certainly Juan Nunez, but like Juan Nunez at the combine, I thought said that like it was, he probably wants to stay in. My impression is he's like a stash if he stays in. Melvin Ajinça is a name to track for sure. Hookporty is auto eligible, so not him.
Trenton Flowers.
Yeah, Rubstavich is auto eligible. I think Trenton Flowers is in. It seems like, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I guess that he could withdraw, but like I don't know where he would go if he withdrew.
Chomchi is definitely in.
Chomchi is a name to track. I don't know what he's gonna do. Like I just don't know at the end of the day. Like, I'm not sitting
Almansa
here.
is Almansa a name that we should follow or no?
Ethan Almansa is definitely a name to track, and then Malik Lewis I think is also a name to track
Malik
there.
Lewis. Yep.
Darlin, Thierry Darlon, that's definitely a name. Think that Elias Kamardine, Noah Penda, I think both of those guys would have real traction to be draft and stash guys in the second round if they decided to stay in. Trying to think of any other names that like could be draft and stash guys. There's a big four mega whose name is it's like a Bogdan
Markovic.
No,
right?
You're thinking of Yelovich. He's also a real potential draft and stash guy. Yeah, that's kind of what's going on.
Who is Traore? Is Traore a guy as well? Armel Traore?
Yes, definitely a guy to track for this. Yeah, potential second round stash, Armel Traore. Let me see here. I have the full list here on internationals. Luka Bogovac is a name I've gotten. I think he is a 21-year-old this year, so I don't think he's auto eligible. Yongshi Kui.
Okay,
he was at the G League Elite Camp. He's a name to track. Quinn Ellis is definitely a name to track. He's gotten a lot of workouts pre-draft. Interesting player for sure. I have to watch Gustav Knudsen. The numbers are really good in Denmark. I haven't watched him yet, so I don't have a strong opinion there, but a name to track at least. Yeah, you're talking. Markovic is the guy's name. Bogoljub Markovic. You're 100% correct.
From Mega, right?
Yeah, I thought that the last name was Bogle. I thought Bogoljub was the last name, but yes, I've watched him a little bit. Seems like a somewhat interesting player to me.
Yeah.
But really the key names here are Almanso, Lewis, Dadier, Ajinsa, Juan Nunez, and Jurisic, I would say, because Jurisic told Wasserman at the Treviso camp that he is very much a open question as to whether or not he's going to be in this draft.
Yeah, and just like to, you talked about the stash or Bronny. I mean, I have Nunez higher on my board than Bronny. I have Hook Porty higher on my board than Bronny. Trenton Flower, he's not a stash guy, but like a lot of the names we talked about are higher on my board than Bronny. So
yeah, Zachary Parent as well. Name to at least look at.
Okay, why do I have in my notes? Oh no, why do I have Illinois written on here for him?
He was at Illinois last year and then moved overseas.
To,
France.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
A couple of people have asked what's going on with Dink Pate. Dink Pate's not eligible for this draft.
Yeah.
I don't know where he's going to end up yet. We'll see where it goes.
Yep.
That's kind of the easiest way to answer that. Like he's not going to get eligible for this draft. That was always a weird. I don't know where that report came from. That was never a possibility from what I understand, because if the NBA had done that, it just like opens the floodgates legally for them on like so many players that are 18 years old. And that just is a really, really bad idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Bryce, this was fun. Let's end it here.
Okay.
Do you have any strong things you need to get off your chest before we podcast again in like 2 or 3 days?
Nah, I'm good. We're getting close. We're only a week and a half away. We'll be live during the first and second rounds. And so I'm excited for that this will be the first time I've done that. And so it'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
It's a great, great time, folks. It's a great time to be a draft fan. We will be back later this weekend / early next week. We might wait until, because the next game is Monday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to do yet there, Bryce. We will figure it out.
Okay.
We will figure it out. Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. There will be a draft guide update at some point, period. I don't have an answer on when that will exactly be, but there will be the draft guide, I believe, goes live this week. It's just I don't know the date and I don't know what's going on there yet. Anything else? No, I don't think so. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's up.
Yeah, so just follow on Twitter at Motor City Hoops. You'll find any scouting reports I drop, any podcasts I do. I don't really write outside of the scouting reports, so just podcasts and scouting reports, and you can find all of that on Twitter at Motor City Hoops. Otherwise, talking with Sam Vecenie right here on the Game Theory Podcast. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Over 10,000 subscribers, the Game Theory Podcast.
That's right.
So
shout out to Bryce yelling that out. Shout out to you guys for listening to the show and subscribing to the show and always being such a devoted listenership. Just past 10,000 over on the YouTube channel. It's fantastic stuff, guys. We really appreciate it. So continued growth. It feels like those subscriber numbers are going up pretty quickly right now, unsurprisingly during draft time. Keep it locked here. We're going to have a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much for hitting that subscribe button. Keep doing it. Hit that like button. Like Bryce said, it always really helps the show continue to grow and emerge. We will be back in a couple of days with more stuff. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.